And the only big mistake we ever made as a force was the same mistake that McGovern made of thinking for a while that we were going to win. Now, if we'd never made that mistake, we'd been way ahead, and this is kind of why I'm retiring from the ranks. I'm going to try to talk a few of the rest of you into doing the same. McGovern is a very good man. He's crazy. He's got media burn. I sat and drank at length with him in Montana, and we talked about all sorts of stuff. And what I kept thinking was, oh, George, if you just could have seen, if you could have had a crystal ball and looked in it and saw what was going to come down and why it had to come down, then, and looked at it way back there, you'd have never dumped Eagleton in the first place, right? He would have been able to speak the truth all the way through and expected to lose. For a while, we began to believe we were going to win. We developed vested interests in the victory to come. We began to parcel off into little groups. Doesn't make any difference which it is. And the Krishnas and the Jesus freaks have now traded places from O'Hare to San Francisco Airport. They used to be back here, now they're over here. The literature they're hanging out is all battling each other. And yet all of these guys are the same halfway through a step acid casualty kid that won't go ahead and complete what he started when he lifted his foot up and got the shit scared out of him and grabbed the first thing that he came to. That one guy grabbed that stick and another guy grabbed this stick and another guy grabbed this stick has set us to fighting each other in all manner of ways. And let me tell you what I think our job is as revolutionaries. I drove back across the country last year and drove through from Washington, D.C. through West Virginia. Our country is in terrible shape, folks. Our country is in terrible shape. One block in any direction off that main Washington, D.C. street is broken glass in the streets. Lots of broken glass. Anyway, driving through West Virginia, through this raped country, through this, staying off the freeways where they've landscaped it, through this torn, terrible country, we passed this guy that his face was so much like the country that we didn't really see him out there hitchhiking. He was about 56, 57. And we picked him up later on in town when he walked up to the car and says, can I get a ride with you guys? And he, just almost 60, skinny guy that had done jail time or VA time, wearing khakis, wearing a baseball hat with a six-pack of beer. I got aside, let him in the car. The guy that was driving the car was this same Bobby from the earlier story, and he took his hat off, and he's got enormous long hair that fell way down here. The guy took a look at him, then took a look at me, and then rethought his whole situation and started talking, freaked out, and started trying to explain his freak out. He says, you guys just don't know. He says, last year, he says, a couple of young fellers came by here. He says, I just finished a construction job. He says, I had a lot of money. He says, I had a brand new suitcase. He says, this couple of young fellas, they picked me up. He said, they took me outside of town here, man. He says, they beat the piss out of me. He says, I almost got away up the bank. Almost, he says, one of the suckers got me by the ankle. He says, they drug me back down there. He says, they just beat the piss out of me, guys. He says, I finally got up to the road, and he says, I waved the car down, and he got into the hospital, and he said, I've been hurt worse than that, a lot. He said, by machines and by cars and horses. He says, but this was different. And I began to get a sense of what he was talking about and about what women are talking about rape. He says, this was different. And he says, the cops finally came in about 3 days and took me back out there to the place. And he says, I got out there, and he says, I saw the grass where it was all bent down and my blood was on it. He says, guys, they just beat the shit out of me. It was like the nation spoke up through this guy. And he was saying, something's hurt deep inside of me. The spirit is hurt in this nation. And only the people whose spirit has not been hurt can help these people. Let me tell you how weird it's going to get.